Hi, Dr. R again, going over an epidemiology question. Why don't we start off with everyone pushing pause and trying to answer this question by choosing the right answer and then saying why each one of them are correct and incorrect. Start now. Okay, so this is the question lead-in. And let's see if we can answer it. Which of the following types of studies is most suited to assess the relationship between adolescent dietary patterns and the development of cardiovascular diseases in adulthood? Well, some of the things we could do is we could actually rule out some of these answer choices based on the question lead-in. So for instance, are we going to do a randomized controlled trial when we are looking at dietary patterns and cardiovascular disease, and we're going to be looking at that in adolescence up to adulthood? How hard would it be to measure, to randomize people to eating certain diets from being an adolescent, so a teen, all the way up to, I don't know, adulthood, 20 plus or 18 plus. So we're talking years and years and years of them eating a certain dietary way. Also, this isn't really suggesting that we force them to eat a certain diet. So for instance, maybe there are two groups, and when they're teens, they eat high protein, and then the other one is high vegetables. Or there is the American diet, which is what most people eat, and then there's some other diet, like, I don't know, low fat or something, which is often not the American diet. And so we're going to ask teens, adolescents, to eat this different diet over a number of years. That's going to be really hard to make happen, and randomizing them, saying that you are going to be, so here's the population that we have, and we're going to create a sampling, and we're going to say you're going to be eating low fat, and you're going to be eating American, and then we're going to follow you. So that doesn't really make sense here, given the question lead-in. I am going to go back here just to make sure to the question stem that I'm on the right track. But these are the thoughts that I start having, is that because I understand how a randomized controlled trial works, it doesn't make sense that this is going to be very likely. Also, it's not looking at randomizing. It's not looking at testing whether they have a specific diet. It's actually asking, what are the dietary patterns? So are there dietary patterns early in teenhood that might lead to cardiovascular disease as an adult? So there might be multiple different dietary patterns here that lead to cardiovascular disease. So what if some of the teens don't have access to good food? So maybe they live in a food desert, right? That happens in America. And if you don't know what that means, it just means you might be in an urban environment and you might not have access to fresh fruits and vegetables because there might not be a grocery store within several miles from where you live. And so you're often not getting the fresh fruits and vegetables, and you're often getting a lot of processed food. That happens. These are the kinds of things that are running through my head when I'm reading about this, that this is not about randomizing different diets. This is about looking at what kind of diets do teens have here, and then of those different diets, which ones develop cardiovascular disease. So what kind of study is that going to fit in? It's not going to fit in a case control because remember, a case control is retrospective. Also, a case control starts with cases, so people that have the disease. And then we choose the controls, those who don't have the disease, right? So is that happening in this situation? Well, let's go back to the STEM and find out. Investigators aim to understand the impact of different dietary patterns, right? So we talked about that, different dietary patterns in adolescence on the development of cardiovascular disease in adulthood. And then they do not manipulate any variables. So not manipulating any of the variables, meaning that we're not putting people in different groups by randomization, that automatically rules that out. So my thinking about the lead-in seemed to fit quite well with what now the STEM is actually talking about. I got reconfirmed that RCTs are not the thing. Also, it doesn't say anything about starting with people that have cardiovascular disease, right? So there's no cases to start with, so that one's out. A descriptive study. Does this follow a descriptive study? Is this a case report? Is this a case series? Or is this a cross-sectional? Well, it's not a case report because it's not just talking about one person. It's not a case series because we don't have a disease and we're not talking about several people with the disease. Is it a case cross-sectional? Well, remember, cross-sectional happens at one specific point of time. And that is not what's happening here. We are following these people from adolescence to adulthood. So not only does descriptive not work, but we can now rule out cross-sectional, right? Because that specific point of time is not there. Is this a cohort study? Well, the answer is yes. We're going to start with a cohort. Those who do not have the disease, right? They're adolescents, they don't have CVD. And we're going to talk about what kind of dietary patterns they have. So we start with a group of adolescents, and we describe their dietary patterns, and then we follow them for a significant amount of time, and then we see how many of them start to get cardiovascular disease. Right? And so if this person, this person, this person, and this person get cardiovascular disease, they become new cases. And those new cases are then compared to those that were at risk of getting cardiovascular disease. So those at risk, which sounds a lot like what? Incidence. So that is incidence, and so that would fit with the most correct answer, which is cohort study, because cohort study looks to define incidence. We're going to get new cases over those that are at risk. I hope you all agree.